Hello Internet, welcome back to Tromsø Twilight, the channel where I, Vincent, talk to you, the world, the universe, the cosmos, about books, movies and films that I either find interesting or enjoy, or both. Today I'm going to talk about the novel Children of Dune, which was published in 1976 and written by Frank Herbert, who also wrote Dune and Dune Messiah before it, and more books in the Dune series. I believe there were originally five, there are now absolutely tons. I basically do this channel for my own entertainment and to kind of organize my thoughts around things I find interesting, and I hope that some people will find the videos and enjoy them. But in this case, I'd actually really appreciate it if you see the video and you've read the novel, if you would leave a comment and tell me what you think about it yourself, because I'm very conflicted about the book, and that's one of the reasons I'm choosing to do this video. I had some issues reading a year or two ago. I've always read a lot, but I was very exhausted with work and I was having a bit of a hard time, and I just was really having trouble focusing on reading. So I asked myself what I used to enjoy reading when I was young, and I realized that I got into reading as a kid by reading classic sci-fi. So I thought, why don't I go back and read some classic sci-fi that I missed? And I'd never read Dune. And I was in Amsterdam in a bookshop and I found a copy of Dune that had this beautiful cover. And I read it, and it was one of several sci-fi books I read at that time that really kicked me back into reading. So I haven't seen the recent movies. I'm not interested to see them. I have seen Lynch's version of Dune, but that was a very long time ago. What I actually remember most about Dune from when I was younger is I was working in a library and a guy came in and asked me if I could order in the whole series for him. And I said, "Oh, I saw the Lynch film recently. It was really incredible how he created this kind of totally different alien world." And this guy said to me, "No, he didn't do that. Frank Herbert did that." And so I always thought afterwards, "Oh, I should get around to reading Dune." Things that kind of maybe held me back are that I'm not the biggest fan of Lord of the Rings and I'm not the biggest fan of Gormenghast, and those are the two things that are always compared to Dune. Uh, so I read the first Dune book, and the first few chapters were very hard for me to get into. I think anybody who has read Dune probably understands this. There's a lot of world building and there's a lot of uh, concepts and language that you come to know as you read it. And at a certain point, things click into place. Something that Herbert does very well is he just lands you in this universe. So it's a little bit weird to do this because if you're watching this video, maybe you've read the book, so you don't need me to recap the whole Dune story. But also, I would like it if people can watch this video without having read all the books, and maybe even if you've read it, you'll enjoy just hearing me kind of pick out some aspects of the narrative. So I'm just going to talk about the story up until Children of Dune, and I kind of have to make my own feelings around it relevant. And the first novel basically is the story of first of this kind of intergalactic aristocrat called Leto, who comes to the planet Arrakis with his concubine Lady Jessica, and they are going to rule this planet. The people of the planet who live out in the desert are called the Fremen, and they are a kind of nomadic culture who have a sort of symbiotic relationship with huge worm creatures that live in the desert and that leave behind them a substance called the spice. And the spice, if you take it, is like a drug. It's addictive. Over time, it changes the color of your eyes to be blue, so all the Fremen have blue eyes. And if you have kind of supernatural or special clairvoyant qualities already, the spice will enhance them. Lady Jessica is a kind of witch. There's this group of women called the Bene Gesserit witches. She has a son with Leto called Paul. The family come into conflict with a baron, and the baron kind of goes to war with them, and Jessica and her son Paul flee into the desert. Then in the second half of the book, Paul Atreides, who is Leto and Jessica's son, joins the Fremen out in the desert, and he becomes a leader and begins a jihad to fight against this repressive baron. So he becomes a kind of folk hero. And at the same time, he's also a kind of messiah. They call him Modib, who is prophesized about that he will come and kind of free the Fremen one day. So this is basically novel number one. And my experience of it was that the second half of it, once they got out into the desert and they kind of ride these worms around, and he becomes part of this culture, and he meets and falls in love with this woman called Chani, who is part of the Fremen, but he ends up having, for political reasons, to marry a Princess Irulan, who is one of these Bene Gesserit witch women. All of that section was like very compelling and interesting, and I felt like once I'd kind of got into this world of Dune, it was super enjoyable and reminded me why I used to enjoy reading sci-fi. But I mean, I've never really read like space opera and things like this, but when you read Dune, you can really understand how influential it's become. Like there would be no Star Wars without it. That's absolutely guaranteed. So Dune Messiah, the second book, is a shorter book, and it's about Paul Atreides once he has become established as the leader of the Fremen, and he's started this in this kind of galactic jihad, and he's now the ruler of many planets, and he's like a force to reckon with. But he's simultaneously still a part of these Fremen tribes. So he's kind of like joined their culture at the same time as he has a political dynasty. And a lot of the book is kind of about him trying to balance these two things. He has a sister who, when she was in the womb, her mother, Lady Jessica, had an overdose of this spice material, so that his sister is not ever young. She has the memories of all of the women who came before her. And in Dune Messiah, this sister, Aaliyah, she has a relationship with, or she begins a relationship with a figure called the Gola. And the Gola is really interesting because he is a man who was who was called Duncan Idaho. He was like a childhood hero and teacher to Paul Atreides, but he has died, and he's been brought back as a kind of clone, or like they've used his body but created a new personality. And through the novel, there's like a conflict in him about, is he Duncan Idaho or is he this new figure, the Gola, which has metal eyes? It's all very creepy and weird. In the course of this novel, Paul Atreides takes a massive overdose of the spice, which gives him this ability to see as if he's out seeing in 5 dimensions, like he's outside of time, and he can see all the possible narratives of his life into the future. At the same time, he's blinded, but he can see because he can sense everything around him without having visual sight. So he can see his possibilities as this head of this jihad, this political dynasty, and what he can see about his future as this Messiah figure is so terrifying that he chooses to go out into the desert and disappear. So I thought Dune Messiah was a really incredible book, and it kind of really interrogates how religion is used, what politics is, power, responsibility, but it also has these really weird, creepy aspects, like this Gola figure who has a consciousness, but he's like a walking reanimated corpse. And then you have Aaliyah, who is this woman who since childhood has been an adult. What happens at the end of Dune Messiah also is that Paul Atreides has children with his partner or his concubine, Chani, the Fremen woman, and they're twins, and both these children have the same kind of memory of every person before them. So it's like they've lived countless lives. They've lived lives that go all the way back to our history on Earth, to the 20th century and before. Okay, so Children of Dune. Children of Dune is the story of these two twins, Paul Atreides twins. They are children, but they have the knowledge and the intelligence of adults. This is the central story is about them. At the same time, this preacher turns up in the desert, which might be Paul Atreides and it might not be, but he's a blind preacher and he seems to be speaking against the government of the planet, which is now run by Olia, Paul Atreides' sister. Olia becomes possessed by the inner representation of the Baron from the first novel, because all of these major characters are related by blood to the Baron, who was the antagonist in the first novel. And part of Children of Dune is about how these characters, the two children, Leto the second and Garni, and Alia, who are born with this kind of genetic memory of every ancestor, that they have representations of all of these people within them. So they're not single personalities. They're like large groups of personalities, and there's a danger that one can take over, and they call this possession. So Aaliyah becomes possessed, and the two children understand this, and they have to find out how they are going to deal with this situation. This book, to me, it was different from the others because it's written in this kind of very episodic style. Like all of the books, I think, were all of the first three, I think, were serialized, but this is the one that seems to be most obviously serialized. It has like quotes from fictitious texts from the Dune universe every few pages, and each time you come to one of these quotes, you kind of change location and you change perspective. So there's lots of different episodes or like storylines happening at the same time. And in nearly every single one, there's some kind of intrigue going on. So the person who you're seeing the situation through their eyes never knows what the other person's motivation is. There's always like intrigue within intrigue. Everybody's paranoid. Everybody is trying to trick and manipulate each other. And at a certain point, it's like so much intrigue and smokescreen that it's kind of difficult to really engage with what's happening. However, like by the end of the book, the character of Leto the second, his kind of destiny begins to become clear. And what happens is that he sees the future that his father refused to live out, and he chooses to follow this path. So I felt like it had like really interesting ideas about time, because on the one hand, it was like, if you could see every pathway available to you, for the first thing, it would be completely overwhelming. Every alternative timeline you could take would just be paralyzing. But it also has this suggestion that there's almost like a fate or a weird that's intended for you, or that events are pushing you towards, but that at major moments in time, you can make choices that will derail it in some way. So it's like Paul Atreides saw himself being pushed towards a certain fate, and he made decisions in opposition to that. But then there's also this fatalistic aspect, because it's as if his son sees the same and understands that he'll have to do it instead. So it's like he takes his place. So it's almost as if the fate can't be avoided, even though you see all these available possibilities for a future. It has this really interesting presentation of time, almost as if it's something spatial. It also has like quite a psychedelic attitude towards identity and personality within these books. Like the Gola, who is he? The dead person, is he the new personality? The children who have all of these ancestors within them, who are in dialogue, which one might take over? The way that it's described, it's how people often talk about dissociative identity today, with like an inner guard defending against other parts of the personality. And towards the end of Children of Dune, it really starts to present how power becomes something terrifying and unwieldy. And so maybe these characters that you might have in some way sympathized with or rooted for, you begin to see that it's sliding towards disaster. So there are a lot of really interesting ideas in the book, and it's very, very ambitious. The issue that I had with it was that it took me forever to read it. Like I could only read a few pages at a time, and given that I have been reading these books to kind of get my joy in reading back, um, that was kind of not what I was hoping for in the third Dune book. It was really a task to get through it, and it honestly only became exciting or really engaging in the last kind of fifth of the book. The rest was huge amounts of world building and kind of intrigue that wasn't enormously engaging to me. So I'm really interested to know if other people feel the same way about this book. Um, One thing I thought, I was trying to be generous, and I thought that it is like walking in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. It's like being out in the desert. It's like doing all of this work to get to the goal, which is also one of the themes of the book. But I think it might be a little bit generous to think that Frank Herbert deliberately made the book feel like walking in the desert, on a desert planet. I think that it might be accidental or unintended. So I'm at a point now where I don't know if that'll be the last of the series that I read. If it continues to be written in this style, I think maybe I'm falling out of it. But even as I say that, it makes me feel sad because I feel so invested and I want to know what happens. And I have felt a great deal of affection for the characters and for the world up until now. So that's my little discussion of Children of Dune and the series up until that point. Let me know in the comments if you've read the book, or if you've read any of the other books in the Dune series, or if you've seen the movies, how you feel about them. I really don't want that director's images of the Dune universe in my head, but I'd be interested to hear about your experiences with it. Um, Let me know. Okay, thanks for listening. Maybe it was a little bit long. I hope it wasn't. Take care.